Hi, I'm Maria Theohara Silvelosos on social media. Welcome to episode 500 of Soul Organised Style podcast.
Sustainable house. So students will work in small groups to develop a plan for a house and land plot and add on solar panels and water towers and gardens and all these amazing things. And I really love that program because at the start, students will be like, we need to build giant mansions. I'm like, we don't need more giant mansions.
That's Yasmin Andrews. She's the education programs developer for Reverse Garbage. Reverse Garbage is turning 50 this year. Grab a cuppa and listen to Yasmin now. Yas, thank you for coming onto the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm excited to be here.
I've already let people know that you're the education programs developer for Reverse Garbage.
Yeah.
When did you hear about Reverse Garbage?
So I heard about it not too long after I moved back to Sydney. So I grew up in New York City and I moved back to Sydney to be closer to family about 4 to 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing some work with the Inner West Tool Library, and some family friends knew that I was interested in creativity and reuse. I think I got referred to the Bower first, that work with the Inner West Tool Library and just kind of being in places and meeting folks. I ended up meeting Kirsten, I think at a community grants event, and that's really what kicked off my knowledge of reverse garbage. I came through and visited a couple of times, and eventually when the listing for what was then the education programs manager role back in, I think it was 2023 was when I applied and was hired. I jumped on it immediately because I was really excited to be able to contribute to such an amazing organization in both a front of house way of being able to interact with students and teachers, but as well as that back of house, really getting into the nitty gritty of what it means to build a program for students to learn about reuse when it's such a critical thing that often gets skipped over to focus on some more what we would call like end of life addresses like tree plantings and recycling centers, which are great and amazing interventions, but there's so much work we can do before that point to protect natural resources.
You are the perfect person to be running these education programs for Reverse Garbage.
Thank you very much for saying that.
You've got the history. And speaking of history, with the programs that you're running and the fact that it's the 50-year celebration, have you found any programs or any things like that in the archives?
Yeah, so when I first came on, I did do a big scoop of all the paperwork and old things that we used to run, and some programs were like somewhat started. Like there used to be a program called Bones, 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 and it was just a stack of like old x-rays, and I couldn't quite figure out what the previous person had wanted to do with that. Though I think exploring anatomy through creative reuse would be a really exciting program for primary school students as that's entering their curriculum, because it's interesting to see what's happening there. But we also have a lot of really old workbooks that I believe the store used to sell, and it would be fun to find a way for the 50th anniversary to do like a reverse throwback that really focuses on those craft skills. And we're looking into that for some of the longer summer program that we're thinking about developing as well. That is almost like reuse throwback. I'm a big fan of 90s crafts like zines and making and like bottle cap buttons, and just finding some fun ways to bring back that just spark of creativity and DIY enthusiasm.
I know that in the sewing community, scrunchies and making scrunchies is
And they're
huge.
so easy to do. And we have so many rubber bands here.
But it's not just that, it's the materials that you use. And that's really the
Absolutely.
focus of what you're doing, isn't it? It's getting people to think about another way of reusing materials.
A big part that comes out in that I'm particularly interested in is the narrative we have around materials. Like, what stories do they tell? Is that from their production and manufacturing? Is it because they're meaningful to us? Is it how we're interpreting them? There's just such a richness of voice when we work with materials compared to just kind of like stick it together kit, paint by numbers. And I think that the creative journey of considering materials and what value they bring into your life can just spark so much joy and introspection for a maker.
So, as the program's developer, do you work front of house as well as with the other educators in Reverse Garbage?
Yeah, I try to get out as much as possible, partially because I like to stay grounded in what's actually achievable in 60 to 90 minutes with students. If I spend a little too much time in my office, I'll just be like, anything's possible. We can make giant dioramas in 60 minutes. And everyone's like, stop, you're shooting for the moon. I'm like, oh. And so I was out just the other week at a school and working with a year 5 class doing DIY packaging and considering what it means to package materials and why there is plastic packaging, but steps that we can move away and use a more diverse set of materials for that. We have a really broad impact throughout Sydney. And I think for the 23-24 financial year, we sat down and did some like heat maps of where our inquiries were coming through and where our actual programs were being delivered. I think the first time I ever went out for an incursion was to a homeschooling group up in, I think it was Box Hill, like a good hour and a half north by car. So we really can spread with the power of our van.
What programs do you offer?
So we offer a lot of things. We go from early learning up into professional development, and they all focus on creative reuse and getting hands-on with materials. What that looks like can vary based on if we're doing it with 3-year-olds, 13-year-olds, or 33-year-olds. In the early learning stage, a lot of it's kind of sensory based, very play based. So we do a lot of loose parts for that 3 to 5 bracket. We absolutely love loose parts play here. It's so exciting to see how different groups, different students will all use the same materials, how it looks like at an early learning center versus at a community festival. There was a session that I went out on and it was looking like a big one. So I threw, I think it was 10 moving boxes into the van just so we had some extra stuff in there and folded them all up. And there was these 2 little boys who just wanted to stack them up in a pyramid and then run in and knock them over. And they were so happy to do that for like 20 minutes. It was amazing to see just that level of engagement and students who just want to roll things up and down and experience motion and see how things go together. And it's all about not prescribing meaning or value to particular items. Like we wouldn't say that piece of PVC pipe is a staff or it looks like a telephone. It's about students discovering that for themselves. As we get up into primary, we start to ground it a little bit more in the 3 R's and talking about reduce, reuse, recycle, particularly the difference between reuse and recycling. That's a hill I've come to stand on very firmly. And I've gotten into a couple of arguments about with peers at university when they're like, oh my God, reverse garbage, you guys do recycling. I'm like, well, no, we do a much more local thing than recycling is. But in those primary school programs, we start to also get into more about different branches of sustainability. So talking not only about environmental sustainability, but social sustainability as well. One program that we do that in is our sustainable house. So students will work in small groups to develop a plan for a house and land plot and add on solar panels and water towers and gardens and all these amazing things. And I really love that program because at the start, students will be like, we need to build giant mansions. I'm like, we don't need more giant mansions. Like, what does it mean to have almost like a self-sufficient land plot and be in community with people who also have those resources, and how can we reach that point? And into the secondary school years, we expand on that program as well with sustainable communities, which has been, I think, one of the first programs that I developed from scratch, and that focused on what does it mean to design a community? What decisions might our councils be making? How can we look at transportation and businesses and resource management, housing, and parks and recreation. So all of these things that contribute to a robust community. And some kids get really into building big parking lots and shopping centers and all of that. And then I'm also like, but what about our bike lanes and our bus stops? And what do those spaces look like for people to get around in communities? And it's really exciting to see students kind of click into that idea of they live in a very real place that they have real power and influence in. So when students do a particularly fantastic job or seem to have like a really clear sense of what it means to be in a community, like there was a group of students who focused on, oh, what if we have this strip that's dedicated to small businesses that could maybe have government subsidies, and there's a bike lane along it, and there's a bus stop right outside. And I was like, you guys should just go talk to your local council, because they were also talking about how the car pickups in their area and how it's not a very walkable space because there's so much road development and it's not safe for students to walk around. I'm like, just bring these ideas to your council, like rally other students behind you, because maybe it won't radically change your city planning for next year, but it begins that seed of change is needed, and also that seed in themselves that they are strong and have a voice and have like very real opinions that are meaningful, to an advisory body that kind of feels like it's just off in some big building somewhere making decisions.
Because this is the environment that they live in every
Yeah.
day. And it's got to be an environment that is worthwhile for everybody and sustainable.
I have a lot of feelings about cars and their place in society. And I think in some ways, like it is important to have vehicles. We need a vehicle to do our work. But I think a lot of that independent ridership is a bit sad to see sometimes. And there's this old advert that was actually done. It was either a car company or a gas company where they had people standing on roads as if they were in a vehicle, but like the vehicle wasn't there. And you could just see how much space like single occupancy vehicles take up on our roads. And then you think about the impact of buses, or in the US, we were seeing a lot of the like bike brigades of students gathering up in the morning to bike to school together. And just that as a social intervention, as a health intervention, as a community intervention to really bring people together is so amazing to see. And it just fostering that spark of like joy and even hope in students that is a reality that's possible, that they have the ability to make possible, and knowing that our community has the kind of like bike to school day that, so it's exciting to see that there is energy for that, and like how do we rally more people behind that to really push for a future that's not only environmentally sustainable but also socially and economically sustainable when we are in it together, rather than kind of like isolated, just having to deal with our own daily realities. That spins out a little bit far of like what we teach quite practically in our classes, but it's like, how do we sow that little seed of like, you can shape what your world looks like?
And behind you is what you told me was a waste hierarchy, a
Yes.
pyramid.
So this would be what's known as the expanded waste hierarchy. So the traditional waste hierarchy is just that: reduce, reuse, recycle. And waste hierarchy is a term that we start using with students around, I want to say like stage 2. We talk about the 3 R's beforehand, but like labeling it as the waste hierarchy starts around there. And is the idea that like first you reduce what you consume and reduce the waste you produce, reuse for as long as possible, and then move it on to recycling as a waste management process. And in the expanded waste hierarchy, which was developed by Charitable Reuse Australia, we still have reduce and reuse up the top, but then we have repair and refurbish. Being able to name specific ways that we reuse things, I think it really helps people understand that it is a very natural and innate process that we engage in. I'm a big believer in language and having the language like talk about things practically. What does it mean to repair a shirt? Is that popping back on a button? Is it sewing up a side seam that is ripped? Refurbishing, how do we change or reimagine items? And then finally, we have recycle and recover, and those are now in an orange red color to indicate that they are a waste management that is now past user life. And then right down the bottom, there is landfill. And I really enjoy that landfill is a part of this hierarchy because it acknowledges that ultimately things will end up in landfill, but everything above that point helps mitigate the volume that ends up there.
And even in shopping centres now,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that where the bins are, they'll have two bins. They'll have a recycle bin, and then they'll also have a landfill bin. And it stops you before you, like, just reading that
Yeah.
stops you from and you've got to make that decision. What do you do? How are you
Yeah.
going to get rid of it?
Labeling of bins has been a really interesting development, and I'm currently a student at the University of Sydney, and they just did a big redesign of their bins in a way that I like, they weren't announcing that it was happening, though it had definitely been in development. And there's
Yeah.
all these like A3 posters on the bin that label like what can go in what bin, and also initiatives the university has. Like there's a composting initiative, so we now have an organics waste bin, and they have to label like what can actually go in there. But even on the recycling bin, once again affirming you cannot put coffee cups in a recycling bin, those have to go into a landfill. And I think that signage is really useful because people will often see a coffee cup and it does sometimes say like biocompostable, fully recyclable, and people think that it can therefore go in that bin. But for some reason, the infrastructure we have doesn't quite line up with what businesses are selling in that regard.
Repair and reuse are some of the values and
Mhm.
actions that a lot of people in the sewing community love to explore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think our textile artists are some of the best reusers and repairers out there because I think it's very innate to the craft in caring for materials in that way and pulling out that longevity. It's a lot of creativity in there to work with the textile materials in that way to repair them. Particularly, we have sashiko repair coming up here, and we have like a textile floral applique process and just the ways in which you can reimagine garments into either a new garment or like a wonderful little accoutrement. It's a area that's so rife with creativity and possibility for that reuse and repair dynamic.
What do you hear people say about the workshops at Reverse Garbage?
We got a lot of positive feedback, which is really exciting to see. I wrote down some of the words that we get a lot. So we get a lot about the impact that it has on students, the way that they can now understand the scope of these problems. One of my favorite facts to lead with for students of all ages is in the most recent annual waste report, it was found that Australia produces 75.8 megatons of landfill waste, which is equivalent to 471 Sydney opera houses. And we do a kind of like imagination exercise of like, can we all picture the Sydney Opera House and how heavy that must be? And now we need to imagine that like 500 times. And you kind of have this moment, like their jaw drops a little bit. Like they're so shocked to hear that and being able to put it into scale of like, you may have your red bin that you put out every week, but so does everybody on your street and everybody in your neighborhood. And like it really begins to build that foundation of like, oh gosh, waste is this huge thing that we all do very organically, very natural. It's like, oh, just chuck it in the bin. It's like, well, what if we take a breath and figure out another option? Like, what does it mean to reuse that material? Is it reusable? Is it like clean material? Can it be cleaned? Can I make it into something? What does it mean to recycle it? Can I just put it into my yellow bin? Do I need to reach out to a specialty recycler to have that material properly managed? It stretches the work that you have to do in a way that can feel a little uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
But reverse garbage likes to make that be an exciting process, a process fueled by curiosity and care. And we can see that students kind of carry that out of the workshop with them. And that's feedback that we get from teachers as well as the engagement that students have. We'll come in and teachers will be like, oh my God, this is the most engaged they've ever been. It's encouragement programming is kind of tricky because we're a fun, exciting thing that's come into the school. We're like a break from the regular schedule. So students are always a little bit like, ooh, very high energy. And teachers like, wow, you guys really get them engaged and they're like super focused and they make these amazing models. I love to hear engagement. It's, okay, we're hitting the mark. People care about what we're doing. And there's also a funny thing that teachers will do where they're like, oh my God, this is just like what I used to do when I was a kid. A lot of teachers will pull me aside in the middle of teaching to tell me about a project that they once worked on or the value it had when they were an adolescent. I'm like,
yeah.
I really love that you're telling me this.
You've got the teacher engaged and the student
And the
engaged.
student, like everyone, we get so much positive feedback about our workshops. And sometimes the feedback that we'll get is also like, we just want more materials to work with. Dual-sided sword there, but it's always exciting when people just want more materials, more time. It's just really exciting. And talking about schools with like how they can set up art club lunch programs, that it is just collect random materials and see what happens. Creative reuse is a really easy intervention that sometimes gets treated as like a very complicated big thing. I'm like, it's just collect your paddle pop sticks and give them a hot water bath and maybe some soap in there and it'll be fine. You got paddle pop sticks now.
How do you feel running these workshops for reverse garbage?
I absolutely love it. It brings a sense of euphoria, especially when things like go right. Not that there's a way that there's a perfect world that the program runs step by step and then it's done perfectly. More so when like I know that students are getting what we're trying to talk about. That comes out a lot when I run the Sustainable Communities program. That's also just one that's really close to my heart. But across the board, just being able to sit down and work with a student, even for a couple of minutes, and show them how to connect two pieces of cardboard with a shoelace. And like, I have taught so many kids how to tie a knot, and I don't know if they still know how to tie that very basic like square knot, but just spending the time with them to like sit down and do that and watching them have that sense of achievement and seeing their plan and their goal like come to fruition is so amazing. And I was never much of a public speaker growing up, and but for some reason, like being in front of a classroom is one of the most comfortable places in the world for me. I absolutely love chatting with students and being in front of a group of adults talking about the same thing. I'm like much more nervous, but kids just have this like wide-eyed curiosity about it. Even the teenagers, sometimes you're in front of a group of teenagers, you're like, I don't think they care. It's like you just gotta keep making it fun, keep making it engaging. And I think a lot of students just want to know that the adults in their lives care about their vision and what they want to make. And Reverse is a really great space for us to do that because it's all about like, we care about this one thing. And however you access also caring about this one thing is a win for us. As long as we get you on the creative reuse bandwagon, we're winning today. So we can kind of like play with what that means to have that student join us on this journey.
It's a win-win for them and for you, and also for, sorry, three wins for you, Reverse Garbage, and the students and their teachers. So,
Yeah.
what education programs can we look forward to in the future?
I know we're considering some longer summer programs for students, typically done just like a 6 hour day, although that was introduced last January as well. So maybe moving quick, but there's a lot of fun stuff to do when you have multiple days. I really want to do a program about kind of like wild Merrickville and talking with the Cooks River Alliance of like, can we bring a group of students around to kind of tour the area, developing almost like a field guide type project, which is similar to work that I had done back in the US, where students look closely at their environment and we learn about what flora and fauna we have, making like a splice diagram of, you see them in like the old school science textbooks where it's a little snapshot of an ecosystem and there's every plant, bug, and animal in it. Like it's making one of those, I think would be really fun. Engage students with the environment around them would be awesome. Doing some stuff about what recycling actually means would be really fun. An in-school version of that would be like a sorting style game where we can kind of talk meaningfully about what materials are what. People are always fascinated to learn that there are 7 types of plastic and they all have different properties and go to different places. So being able to get kids engaged in like, how do you identify these different types of plastics? And if we need to make a plastic choice, what is a good plastic choice? A bit of a paradoxical statement there, some would say. Still really important information to have. Even talking with students about how they can read the tag on their clothing to understand what materials it's been made out of has been an interesting journey in the last couple of months. Looking more with animals, I really love the natural world. I think it's really fun and it's something that kids are kind of primed to engage with. So looking into like habitats and adaptation and camouflage, and with the materials we have, I know there's a bit of like a fantasy spin on this. If we're still using that same like scientific reasoning and logic, it still supports those more academic learning goals. What would the habitat be of a binder clipped butterfly and why is it suited to that habitat? I think would just be a lot of fun.
Sounds like it. Is there anything that we've missed about the role that you play and what you do for Reverse Garbage?
So one thing that I work on quite a bit is our public programming as well. It's really great and exciting for schools to come to us, but I also love to consider how we can engage our community at large, particularly the local Inner West community. So we work with a lot of artists who are shoppers with us, who have known about us for a long time, and provide them a space to deliver their own programming. And we can support them in the kind of like marketing of that as well, so they can reach an audience. And that's also a great way to do those longer term kid-centered projects in the summer, just really thinking about how we can bring that creativity and that joy into everyday life, especially for kids who maybe don't want to do Saturday soccer all the time. The public programming here is always really exciting, and seeing new faces come in. People have traveled to come see our public programs, and it's also great to just work with so many artists as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, if people want to get in contact with Reverse Garbage regarding any of the programs, what should they do?
They should email education@reversegarbage.org.au. That is our primary inbox where we field a lot of things, questions about what we do, any like partnerships or big projects that you have in mind. But if you're interested in just having us visit a school, or if you want to do a small private booking of one of the workshops that we do, we have an inquiry form online and you can just fill that out with all your details and we'll let you know if we can make it possible, and we try very hard to make a lot of things possible just because we love to get out in community so much.
And it's good you have the vehicle to be able to do that. Sorry, I threw that in.
That ed van, it is a lifeline for us to get around. Sometimes we're in the ute. It's always exciting to be out on the road. I've had friends of mine be like, oh, I saw the reverse garbage van or the reverse garbage truck today. I'm like, yeah, we're out there and people are noticing us.
Yasmin, thank you for being on the podcast for Reverse Garbage. I really loved speaking to you and hearing about all the work that you and everyone there does.
Amazing, Maria. It was really great to talk with you. And I love to share about what we do, because it's, to this day, there's still people who are like, oh, you guys have education programs? I'm like, we've had education the whole time, the whole 50 years.
And happy 50 years of operating at Reverse Garbage.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Hi. This episode of So Organised Style Podcast was both video and audio produced by me, Maria Theoharis, in my sang room with permission of Kirsten of Reverse Garbage to celebrate their 50 years of operations. Head to Reverse Garbage on the 20th of September to celebrate this important milestone. Sound by Kaneef on YouTube. Many thanks for the ongoing support of the podcast Patreon contributors, as their ongoing support each month enables me to develop this podcast for you for free. You can subscribe to So Organised Style Podcast, spelt with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Thanks for enjoying episode 500. I look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.